Welcome to the Real World. My name is Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode 72 of the Real World podcast. Today we're talking about two famous directors, brothers, Tony and Ridley Scott. Thank you for joining us on the Real World YouTube channel. Make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. We're all about movies here. We've got all kinds of Blu-ray reviews, movies, reactions out of theaters, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos. Let's kick things off as we usually do with some movie news. Superman Legacy adds 3 new cast members this past week, including Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor, Skylar Gisondo as Jimmy Olsen, and Sarah Sampaio as Miss Tessmacher. All of these new cast members have joined the cast of Superman Legacy, which continues to grow. Already had several cast members added, but now we have a more rounded out cast. So I'm curious to see who else they cast as Jonathan and Martha Kent, Jor and Laura L. Few roles still yet to be cast. We don't have really any details on the story, so we're still waiting on more plot synopsis, but the cast looks really good so far. I'm very excited about this new take on Superman from director James Gunn and his new DC universe. A new Bourne movie is in development from the director of All Quiet on the Western Front, Edward Berger. He is signed on to direct a new film in the Jason Bourne franchise, which of course starred Matt Damon. We don't know if he's coming back. We don't know if Jeremy Renner is coming back as his character Aaron Cross from the Bourne Legacy. I know a lot of fans wanted a crossover film. They talked about doing that for a while. I don't know if that's what this is, or if it's going to be a complete reboot of the series, much like James Bond getting a new actor to play the role. I think that could work as well. It's been enough years. So we'll have to wait and see what exactly this movie is, but I'm interested in it because that's a big franchise that I'm a big fan of. Speaking of Bourne, Doug Liman, who directed The Bourne Identity, is set to direct his next film, which is a remake of The Saint. That's a film starring Val Kilmer. Now Regé-Jean Page will be playing the title role of that film, which is an action movie. Very interested to see what they do with that. Another continuing franchise is The Karate Kid. It was announced about a year ago that they were making a new Karate Kid movie, but we didn't have any casting details. Now we know that both Ralph Macchio, the original Karate Kid, Daniel LaRusso, and Jackie Chan, who is the mentor figure in the reboot or the remake of The Karate Kid from 2010, are both going to star in this movie together. And they are on a global search for the star of the film. The new Karate Kid is being looked for right now across the world. You can send in your audition tapes. They're obviously looking for someone with some martial arts background and acting experience. So if you have either of those things, I recommend getting a video together and getting it out there. Should be very interesting to see who they end up finding and casting in this role. But I am actually excited about this. I'd never thought that we'd get a crossover here with the two stars of the Karate Kid franchises. Going to be very interesting to see what they do. If it ties in with Cobra Kai, which is the series on Netflix, I'm not sure. But it should be interesting to see what they do with that moving forward. Over at Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni has been named the Chief Creative Officer. He will now oversee every project, movies and TV series at the studio. Very happy about this news. He obviously is a fan favorite creative behind the scenes, been working ever since the Clone Wars show with George Lucas back in 2008. So he's been at Lucasfilm for a long time, and he has done some great work over there. Some of my favorite stuff comes from him, including Star Wars Rebels, the recent Ahsoka series. He's, of course, worked on The Mandalorian with Jon Favreau. So he's been very involved at the studio, and I'm really, really excited for this new role. I hope he's still able to write and direct while also taking on this kind of bigger role overseeing a lot of the projects at Lucasfilm. All right, before we leave movie news, we're going to leave you with a few movie anniversaries that just happened recently. One is The Hunger Games Catching Fire, turned 10 years old just last week. Of course, the new film, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is now in theaters. We've got our reaction to that. We've got a podcast on that. We've got a spoiler review on that on the channel right now. So check out all that if you're a Hunger Games fan. The other one I had to mention was one of my favorite movies ever, celebrating its 20th anniversary, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. It's the best naval film I think ever made. We did it on our Nautical Films podcast. We talked extensively about this, so check that out on the channel now. Great film with Russell Crowe. Peter Weir did a fantastic job directing this. Very authentic, celebrating its 30th anniversary is Mrs. Doubtfire. This is a favorite of mine that I didn't see until later in life, but it's one of Robin Williams' best performances. It's a great, heartfelt story about family, and it's celebrating its 30th anniversary. So I had to mention that. Celebrating its 40th anniversary just in time for the holiday season. It is A Christmas Story. This is a classic, of course, many families grew up watching. It's now got a sequel called A Christmas Story Christmas. You can watch it on Max. Definitely well worth a watch. It's, I think, actually superior to this original movie. But this one has a lot of great quotes in it, a lot of great moments that are very memorable. So check it out if you haven't. It's streaming now, and stream A Christmas Story Christmas, the sequel, on Max. All right, folks. Well, that's it for movie news. Now it is time to jump into our main topic, which is the Scott brothers, Ridley and Tony Scott, directors with long careers. And we're, of course, talking about them because the new film Napoleon is out, which is directed by Ridley Scott. It is now in theaters. Didn't have a chance to see it, but we still wanted to talk about both of these directors because they have, again, long careers, have done some amazing work over the years. And so joining me on this episode is Bert. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. How's it going?
Doing well, doing well. We're done with our Thanksgiving celebrations here and starting to decorate for Christmas over here at our house. So we're kind of already getting into the Christmas movie mode, but definitely wanted to take
Yeah.
some time to rewatch some Ridley and Tony Scott movies, and so that's what we did this past week, and it was quite amazing. Really talented directors. So let's kick things off with Mr. Tony Scott. All right, so jumping into Mr. Tony Scott, he was born June 21st, 1944, in England. Both the Scotts were part of a military family, so they moved around a lot. They actually lived in Germany for a while, various other places around Europe. And this director, unfortunately, tragically took his own life back in 2012 at the age of 68. So he's no longer with us. But he left behind a great career, over 16 films directed, over 27 years. So he was a director for a long time. He's 7 years younger than Ridley Scott. The film that kind of put him on the map was Top Gun. That was kind of the big one that really launched his career. So, director that I've enjoyed many of his films over the years. Before we jump into some honorable mentions, before we get into our top three, anything you wanted to mention about him, Bert?
I just thought I mentioned visual style
Mm,
because these guys didn't make the exact same kind of films.
right.
Obviously, Tony, his visual trademarks. I read one comment that said heavy use of smoke, colored filters, shafts of light breaking through windows, often through blinds. That may be true. To me, what I got from his films was he liked to do sort of like modern, slick, hip kind of movies for the most
Right.
part,
Yeah.
often involving like modern tech.
Mm,
I would say he generally tried to appeal to a younger audience than his brother.
yep.
Um, I read too that he was originally supposed to direct The Rock,
Oh, interesting.
which wouldn't really be a stretch. I mean,
Yeah.
Bay and Tony Scott, I think some of their style overlaps a little bit as
Sure.
far as the quick edits and
Right. Right.
people with short attention spans like me.
Yeah.
Uh so and then also yeah, he didn't really do like historical dramas like his brother.
Right.
Tony used mostly American actors in his
Mm,
roles
hmm.
too. So those are some very distinct differences between the two bros.
Yeah, great points. Yeah, I didn't really think about that, but yeah, every Tony Scott movie is set in modern day. Yeah, he doesn't really
Yeah,
go back and do those historical epics or any
right.
sci-fi really. Doesn't really dive heavy into the sci-fi element either. So, yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, definitely. So let's jump into some honorable mentions. First, of course, as I already mentioned, Top Gun. This is, a great movie, really solid 80s kind of military action film. It's got some good drama in there, some good comedy. It's just a well-rounded movie, and one of the most popular movies when it was released, and still to this day. Of course, we just got Top Gun Maverick, which of course, he couldn't be a part of, but I think they very much stuck to the spirit of what he created here in the original. So
Yeah.
had to bring that one up. One that I really like, of course, he collaborated with Denzel many times. We know this.
Yeah.
And Deja Vu, I think, is really good. I think it's kind of underrated, actually. Not a lot of people talk about this. It's got a sci-fi element to it. It's not, again, it's not heavy sci-fi, but it's a really cool kind of sci-fi idea and concept that I think is really well executed. I've watched this numerous times. I think Denzel's great in it. Jim Caviezel is wonderful here as well. So definitely one I would recommend. Just didn't quite make my top three. And then the other one I had that I own here is Unstoppable. This was actually better than I remembered. Just rewatched this the other night, and it has a commentary by Tony Scott on it too, which was a lot of
Oh,
fun to listen
nice.
to.
Wow.
And I think both Denzel and Chris Pine are great here. It's based on a true story, which adds another element to it that I really enjoy. No CGI here. That's one thing that I found amazing
Mm,
is that they're really doing all
yeah.
these train stunts and everything. They're really wrecking the trains and jumping on top of the trains, and all that stuff just makes it, more real, more impactful for me, kind of more engaging. So, big fan of Unstoppable. I think that's a really good one. Did you have any honorable mentions before we get into our top three?
Yeah, I had rewatched Unstoppable. I actually liked it a little less
Oh,
than the
really?
last time I
Okay.
watched it. I don't really know why. I know
Yeah,
it's based on a true story. I wonder though if it's a bit fictionalized from that original true story,
I'm
but
sure it is.
maybe
Yeah,
not. I don't
yeah.
know. And then I have to circle back to Top Gun.
Hmm.
Top Gun, yeah, it's a fun movie. I've seen it, a few times over the years,
Hmm.
but really, I mean, it because Top Gun begat Top Gun Maverick. That's why Top Gun's so instrumental because Maverick, I mean, well, Top Gun is Tom Cruise, the actor for hire, whereas Maverick is Tom Cruise, producer and
Right.
actor. And obviously,
Yes,
the films with him as producer have just notched it up and more and more and more over the years. Maverick was
definitely.
really, really good.
Yep.
So I just had to mention that. Another Denzel film that I actually liked. I saw this in the theater. It wasn't like a 5-star film or anything, but The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3,
Yes.
which I think is a remake. I haven't seen the
Yep.
original, but I like
Yep.
that one too.
Yeah, it's a solid movie.
Mm-hmm. And then the last honorable mention I'll say is Man on Fire,
Hmm.
which I enjoy quite a bit. It just didn't quite make my top three.
Gotcha. Excellent. All right, folks. Well, we're ready to jump into our top three now. Tony Scott movies. We're going to move on to Ridley in just a moment, but let's take a quick look. Bird, do you want to kick us off or do you want me to?
Sure, I can. Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, at three, I've got Enemy of the State.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, and this is that. This is maybe the one, the most that has the most sort of like those quick edits and
Mm,
almost kind of bizarre camera angles sweeping around to really sort of have constant motion and again just constant trying to get your attention. I
yes.
guess you could say it's a very creative style. But I
Mm,
really like Enemy of the State. Will Smith, I liked him more pre-slap. I've said that before. I don't think I'm alone there. But honestly, I'm here for Gene Hackman. Just
mm.
enjoy his character in this film so much. And of course he's playing, I guess, the same character from The Conversation from 1973. He
Right, I
has a
heard
different
that.
name,
Yeah.
but yeah. But this is kind of like his retirement years, I guess,
Right.
in the movie. But it's so good. The ending is a little too neat, throughout this film. Will Smith's character, he kind of makes a lot of mistakes, I guess, boneheaded sort of mistakes, and I think the worst one he makes is when he walks into that I don't know, was it at a restaurant or something at the end of the film
Right.
and to bring everybody together. But
Yeah.
amazingly, that one works out beautifully
Right.
for him, a little too beautiful. But anyway, it's so much fun. 3.5-star film for me.
Excellent. Great choice. With my number three, I went with Spy Game. I'm
Mm,
actually a big fan of Spy Game. I'd only seen this once before, but I got a chance to rewatch it this week. It was a lot more engaging this time. I think, like we're saying about his visual style, a lot of quick cuts, a lot of active camera work, very
yes.
engaging and interesting. Definitely keeps your attention. The Dan Mendel cinematography, he's the guy that did the recent J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, Star Wars
Oh,
movies, Mission Impossible 3. He did an underrated movie I like called John Carter, sci-fi movie. And so his eye is just really good for these big sweeping shots as well as just really good intimate close-ups. I mean, he's just got a great eye for good camera work. This one had a budget of 115 million, grossed 143, so it didn't really make a ton of money when it came out. back in 2001. This was right after September 11th. I don't think people were really interested in the subject matter at that time. They're like,
Mm,
kind of didn't want to know about it was all set in the Middle East and like all about the kind of espionage that goes on over there. So yeah, I don't think it was very well received when it came out, but I think over time it's gained some popularity. Robert Redford, one of my favorite actors ever. I mean, he's just incredible in
yeah,
everything. He
yeah.
gives a very weighty performance. He just brings a lot of gravitas to any role he steps into. He's a very likable character, yet he's a little bit deceptive. I mean, it's all about spies and the whole kind of spy game of the whole thing that the title suggests. So there's that element to it. But him and Brad Pitt, they just have a great chemistry. I think they had just worked on A River Runs Through It a
Yeah.
few years before this, and that camaraderie was definitely there. You see it on screen. It's kind of one of these mentorship roles that these two characters have, and they're just really good. Back and forth is really good there. And so, yeah, really just enjoyed the movie. It's got a lot of the kind of bureaucracy side, like in Washington, and it's got like the guys on the ground that are actually, doing the work of kind of like the soldiers and the spies. So it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and so yeah, I would recommend Spy Game if you haven't checked it out.
I haven't seen it since it came out. I don't remember
Mm,
a whole lot about it. I've listened to the score a few times. There's some good tracks on the score.
it is a good score. Yeah, I don't know if that one is Harry Gregson Williams. Is that who does that one?
Yeah,
I
I
know he
think
works.
so. I
He
think
works
so.
with. Yeah, it was him. He works with Tony Scott a lot on these scores, and
Yeah,
he's a good composer. So,
yeah.
yep, yep. All right, what's your number
Nice.
two?
Okay, my number two, perhaps surprisingly to at least one person that listens to the podcast, my number two is actually Deja Vu.
Oh, okay,
I have to,
great.
yeah, circle back to this one. Previously, when this film came up, I think in our Denzel, top Denzel films
Yes.
podcast, I said that Deja Vu. I started to watch it years back. It gets to the part. Okay, spoilers now for anybody who hasn't seen it. I don't think it really spoils a whole lot to know this though. But anyway, when they get to the part where you find out where Denzel's character finds out you can sort of look back in time to
Yes.
see in the running thing that's going on. The first time I watched it, I don't. It just seems so out of left field for the kind of movie that I was
Right.
watching that
Sure.
I watched a couple more minutes and I turned it off. I was like, this is ridiculous, and I
Right.
just switched it off. So this time, because we're doing this podcast, I said I'm going to sit through it, and I didn't remember a whole lot, but when I got to that part, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the part, and
Yeah.
I wrote it out. And let me say that it's actually really good. I mean,
It's
if you
good, right?
accept the premise, like if you
Right.
accept that this is, albeit kind of a unique
Yeah.
time travel film,
Sure.
if you accept that, then it's actually very creative how they use that angle of it.
Right.
And
Right.
so it just doesn't feel like a time travel movie up to that point. But
Yeah.
again, once you accept it, so I really liked Deja Vu. It's actually quite similar in a way to Frequency from 2000.
Oh, okay.
Have you seen
I have not seen that
Frequency?
actually.
Oh,
No, I've heard of
okay,
it, but
yeah.
yeah,
So there's a similar kind of thing. That's all I'll say.
sure.
And that one's really good as well.
Okay.
But Deja Vu, I mean, well directed. Denzel's always good.
Hmm.
And I'm a huge fan of time travel films.
Yeah.
So I left this one. I guess I would still leave this out of my top five Denzel movies because he's got so many good ones, but it's
Sure.
right up there close next to it.
Yeah.
But I gave it 4 stars this time.
Awesome. Yeah, I really enjoy that movie. As I mentioned in my honorable mentions, it's one I've visited a couple of times over the years, and yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
enjoy that. So yeah, I'm glad it made the list. All right, on to my number two. That was your number three, Enemy of the State. Huge fan of this movie.
Oh, mhm.
This is actually the first Tony Scott film I ever saw. It's just one that I've again revisited a number of times and I've always enjoyed. I just really like the pacing. Again, that's the
Yeah.
thing about his movies. They're like they're breakneck speed, right? I mean, they're just
Yeah.
constantly moving, and especially a movie like this where it's a chase film, right? I mean, he's
Yeah.
on the run the whole time. He's trying to get away
Yeah.
and figure out what's
Yep.
going on. It's one of these great
Mhm.
kind of conspiracy thriller wrong man plots, is what they call them.
Yeah.
Hitchcock did a lot of these. Like North
Okay.
by Northwest, if anyone's seen that, Cary Grant is like caught up in this weird conspiracy. He doesn't know what's going on. It's a
Mm.
mistaken identity type thing. They think he's one guy, he's not really. And so I think they just handle that whole plot really well. Will Smith is great in it. It's one of my favorite movies he has ever made. And like you said, though, Gene Hackman is the highlight. I mean, he is just phenomenal in this role of this, cranky old man kind of,
He's
you
so much
know.
fun. He's so angry, but he's so much
Yeah,
fun.
right, exactly. You love this character as soon
Yeah.
as you see him, and it's just really good. He's kind of mysterious at first. You're not really
Hmm.
sure, and then as the story goes on, it's this kind of becomes a two-hander with both of those characters going through it. And I noticed Tony Scott does that a lot too, like Spy Game I just mentioned with Redford and Pitt going back and forth. He kind of does that a lot. Unstoppable has that element to it. Kind of two characters who are very different that kind of have to work together and so
Yeah.
I really like that Cole stuff, the kind of odd couple thing. And so yeah, it's just a great story. It's about a kind of family man, a kind of average guy going through this journey, which I just find to be really compelling. So yeah, that's one that I had to have in the top three. I wasn't sure where it would land. I originally had it at number one, and through rewatching some of them, another one bumped it out. So yeah, that's a great one. It came out in '98. And it did really well at the box office, $250 million box office haul on a $90 million budget. So made a lot of money. So it's one of his more popular ones for sure. But yeah, that's where I ended up at number two, Enemy of the State. All right, we're on to your number one.
Okay. So at number one, I've got Crimson Tide.
Nice. I knew you were going to have that in there somewhere. That's a great one.
Yeah.
I really need to rewatch this. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Mm, yeah.
That's the only reason it probably didn't make, if I had a chance to rewatch it, it might have been in my top three, but go ahead with your
Gotcha.
Crimson
Gotcha.
Tide praise.
Yeah. I mean, it's just an intense, claustrophobic,
Yeah.
thriller. It's really, this film showcases two of the best actors, I think, in history,
Yeah.
Hackman and Denzel.
Yep.
Um, the stuff on the sub, it feels very realistic. Like I never served in the armed services, so I can't say for sure, but it just feels very real. Like it looks like that's what would happen in that
He does that
scenario.
a lot. Even I meant to mention that about Spy Game, that the
Mm,
realism he brings to his films, it's really
right,
evident that he does research and it all does feel very
right,
authentic.
right. With like the lingo, especially in Crimson Tide and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, and then the score. We talked briefly about this film in our Denzel podcast, but the score has that tremendous singular theme that gets played a couple times in the film, and then at the very end too, on the end credits. But other than that, it's just kind of an ambient score. So
Mm,
it's like a nice one themer score,
sure.
but it's a great theme.
Yeah.
And but yeah, this is just an excellent drama. I mean, that's just best thing I could say about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like you said, with Denzel and Gene in there, I mean, it's like just
Mm.
two heavy hitters just going head to head. It's just exactly what you want from a great movie like that. Just the tension that's built throughout it and all of it. It's just very well done.
Is Hackman at his best when he's angry? I mean, it would seem clear.
100%. 100%. He does angry very well. All right, on to my number one. Again, this was a rewatch. It's a movie I think I had probably only seen once, maybe twice, but on this recent rewatch, it shot way up there. It is Man on Fire.
Okay.
I just found this to be riveting throughout. Again, very well paced movie. It's almost 2.5 hours long. Did not feel that long at all.
Mm.
Came out back in 2004. $70 million budget, grossed 130, so pretty decent hit. Denzel's just amazing here. He's playing a character that's very unique for him in that he's kind of a broken, kind of guilt-ridden type character who's got this very, dangerous past and kind of a deadly character who's kind of looking for forgiveness, looking for redemption, looking for kind of a new start at life. And he finds it through this bodyguard role that he's taking on with this young girl played by Dakota Fanning, one of the best child actresses ever. I mean, she's just
Yeah.
incredible. War of the
Yeah.
Worlds we've
Yeah.
talked about many times before, and she's
Yeah.
always just great. She's equally good here. And the way the film builds that relationship is, I think, what makes it work so well. Because basically, the first hour, there's no action. It's really just these two characters getting to know each other, and you're
Hmm.
just investing in this relationship so much. They have a lot of comedic moments and just real emotional connection between those two characters that's built throughout. And then once the inciting incident happens and she becomes in danger, it becomes this kind of revenge mission, and so it becomes this very kind of intense kind of film where he's capturing guys and doing all kinds of crazy torture and kind of crazy stuff going on. you
Yeah.
know, pulling out the arsenal and blowing stuff up, and all the big action starts happening, right? And it's all, again, very realistic. They shot it all on location in South America, and it just has a great look to it. This, I think, has probably his best visual style. Director of photography was a guy by the name of Paul Cameron, who I wasn't aware of, but he shot Deja Vu. He shot the Total Recall remake that we've talked about
Oh,
several times before, and
yeah.
Michael Mann's Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx, which I'm a big fan of as well. So just a great visual style again, a lot about perspective. You know, there's a scene where Denzel's getting drunk, and just what they do with the camera just kind of puts you in his shoes. Again, a very active camera. Camera's constantly moving, quick editing, just all that. All his signature stuff is there. But it's just full of life and gives the whole movie energy. Just a great film. It got a great supporting cast. Mickey Rourke's in there in a kind of small roles, a great kind of slimy bad guy. Mark Antony is great in this as well. All the whole cast just does a great job. Christopher Walken, I totally forgot was in this, but he's wonderful here. He's very much not his typical comedic self that I'm used to seeing him. He's a very grounded kind of mentor role, which was interesting. So I think everyone just does a great job here. Production design, you know, the stunt work and the action is all just really well shot and put together. Great themes, you know, themes of sacrifice and courage and determination. Redemption, you know, is a big theme there too. So yeah, just a very well-rounded movie that I was kind of blown away by. And so yeah, I'm glad I gave it a rewatch because it definitely, like I said, bumped it way up. I'm at about 4.5 stars on it.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't quite make my top three, but I do like that one. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah, good movie. All right, folks. Well, that's it for our Tony Scott discussion. Now we're jumping over to his brother Ridley Scott. Ridley Scott was born November 30th, 1937. He is 86 years old now and still churning out movies. I mean, this guy shows no signs of slowing down, which I think is great because he's such a great filmmaker. His uncle, I found out, was a pioneer of cinema chains in England, and so that's kind of how he got into movies. He kind of would go to the theater for free because his uncle was a pioneer of these cinema chains over in the UK. So that's kind of what started his love for film. Of course, his first film is called The Duelists, which is a great movie. But the major success came with his second film, Alien, which was a huge hit back in 1979. And to date, he has directed 29 films, including the upcoming sequel to Gladiator. So he's on his way to his 30th movie, which I think he's already planning. He's planning on doing a Western, which will be interesting. He's never done a Western before. He's also the owner and founder of Scott Free Productions, which you'll see come up on a lot of his and his brother's movies. So that's a little bit about Ridley. Do you have anything you wanted to mention specifically about the other Scott here?
Yeah, just that his the performances that he's gotten out of his actors. Granted, he chooses the kind of films that would sort of cater more to a performance that would get Oscar attention.
Sure.
But you know, Russell Crowe won an Oscar for his performance in Gladiator, and then 7 other actors in his movies have won an Oscar for their performances. So that's an interesting fact.
Wow, yeah, that's impressive. Yeah, but
Yeah.
not many directors have can say that. That's great. All right, let's look at some honorable mentions. So, like we said, this guy's been directing for so long. I own many of his movies, so I'm just going to go through some of these quickly here. First, as I mentioned, Alien, one of my favorite sci-fi movies, one of my favorite horror movies ever made. I think it's brilliant. Huge fan of Alien. Another one that doesn't get talked about a lot is Legend. Legend came back in the 80s. It's Tom Cruise, very underseen movie. Tim Curry as the villain here is just fantastic under all this makeup. It's just a really kind of it's experimental. It's very kind of ethereal and just out there and weird, and it's just kind of a vibe movie. It's like there's a very basic story, but it's kind of just a movie you kind of just hang out with and just kind of get lost in it a little bit. It's one that I've enjoyed numerous times. This Blu-ray has the director's cut on it, which is better than the theatrical version, I believe. Let's see a few more here. Black Hawk Down, I think, is great. Really big fan of this movie. Really solid, true story war film. Great cast there as well. Body of Lies, I think, is a really solid. It reminds me a lot of Spy Game. You know, it's kind of like that kind of feel to it. DiCaprio and Crowe here do a great job in that. And then these were the closest to making it in my list. One is The Martian by with Matt Damon, which I think is just a great movie, great showcase for a performer. You know, we're talking about that. That's like one of Damon's best roles because it's basically just him. It's kind of like Castaway in that way. Yeah, big fan of The Martian. My wife is a big fan of that one as well. And then I really like this Robin Hood movie he made back in 2010. I think this is actually a really solid sort of medieval action movie, is what I would kind of characterize it as. And it's sort of the origins of Robin Hood in an interesting way. It just really is solid. It's again Russell Crowe and Kate Blanchett is great in it as well. So I would recommend that. This one also has an unrated director's cut on it, which I think is superior to the theatrical version. A lot of his films have alternate director's cuts that end up coming back later, and I think are a little bit better usually than the theatrical versions. But those are some of my honorable mentions. Did you have any in yours?
Yeah, Alien and Prometheus and Alien Covenants are all done by Ridley Scott, and I like them all. I think I pretty much like every Alien film, except none of them are like 4.5, 5-star films for me. They're most of them are 3.5 star. So I like all of those. I haven't seen Aliens in a while though. The second one, that one might be significantly better. I remember being really great, but
Yeah, yeah.
so I had to mention those. Black Hawk Down. I mean, what a terrific movie. I've said this before. Actually, I was thinking about it. I've actually only ever seen the film once
Oh.
because it was so difficult to take in that I just had trouble reaching for it again and
I'm the
watching it.
same way. Yeah, I'm the same way with that one. It's one I think I've only seen maybe twice, and it's not.
Yeah,
It's very intense
yeah.
movie.
But I mean, for war films, I mean, it's like you really can't get any better
Oh,
almost.
sure. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I have to mention All the Money in the World. Have you seen
Mm,
this film?
I have. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Oh man, I sought this one out partly because I was so interested in this idea that Kevin Spacey had filmed the
Oh,
lead
right. Yes.
part, and then because of a apparent scandal, Christopher Plummer took over. So,
Yeah.
and this film is actually very good. It's very good. I'm probably at 3.5 stars.
Mm,
But what's interesting is on the performances. I looked it up. Christopher Plummer, he's sadly since passed away a couple years ago. What a great
mm.
actor.
Yes.
But he was 30 years older than Kevin Spacey, and so as I'm reflecting back on the film, I'm thinking, well, I don't know how do you even just bring him in for reshoots because I don't even think that all the family dynamics would
Line
make
up.
sense, but maybe
Yeah.
they would. Like, I'd love to hear a commentary on it. I didn't see if
Right.
I didn't get the Blu-ray to see if there is one, but
Yeah.
that would be fascinating to kind of hear. And I'd love to
Yeah.
see. I don't know if this has ever happened before to small degrees, maybe where there's been two people that have performed the same role in a
Right.
film, and one of them got booted.
Right.
Uh, like Back to the Future, for instance. We've
Right.
seen a
Yeah.
little bit of Eric Stoltz footage, but it'd
Right.
be pretty interesting to see a full length feature with two different actors, on two different viewings.
Yeah. Right.
But everything
Right.
else remains the same.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah.
really
Everything around
interesting.
them is the same, but it's that one thing
Yeah.
that's changed. Yeah. That's so fascinating.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so yeah, that's I had to mention that it's at least a 3.5 star film, quite enjoyable. Yeah.
Great. Before I forget, I had one other honorable mention. I forgot to pull it out. It is Matchstick Men. Have you seen this yet?
I think I've seen bits and pieces of it.
Okay. I really like this movie. It's Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell. Huge fan of both of those actors.
Mm,
And they just do a great job. They're playing con artists, basically.
yeah.
And it's a really great story. His daughter ends up coming into the story. She's really great as well. So it's just got a great dynamic between the three of them and a lot of humor. It's very grounded film, which I really like about it, and it's very relationship and character driven. So I had to mention Max Stickman because it's one that I've visited a number of times. It's probably honestly up there with one of the ones I've rewatched the most for Ridley Scott. So
Mm,
definitely recommend that one if you haven't checked it out.
gotcha.
All right, folks. Well, that's it for our honorable mentions. Now we're going to jump into our top three Ridley Scott movies. Bert, why don't you kick us off?
I have got Robin Hood from
Oh,
2010, the
great.
one that you mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah.
The film at times, this is the guy that made Gladiator. There's times where it feels like it's almost in the same universe or level of epicness.
Yeah.
But not always, so
Right.
so it does accomplish that epicness a fair bit. I like that this is a different story of Robin Hood. It's not
Yeah.
like the typical one.
Right.
And the film looks stunning. The only thing that really kind of falls short, surprisingly, is the score. I don't really think the
Mm,
score is the greatest, interestingly.
yeah.
But then again, Gladiator is like a top 5 score all time, so it's kind of hard to compare
Sure.
to Gladiator. But I just, in general, the score could have been a little better.
Right.
And It's also quite long. I watched the extended cut. I think it's like 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
and so I'd recommend the theatrical cut for anyone who's watching it. But it's a 3.5 star film. I thought it's a very good one. It's one I've seen a few times now.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Robin Hood story. I read a Robin Hood book when I was younger, and he's always just fascinated me as a kind of like legendary character, that like could have maybe existed in some way, but probably didn't, probably was like a folk tale. But yeah, I think they just did a great job of grounding that movie again and kind of like making it interesting. He's returning from the Crusades, and it's steeped in that real history, which I like too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
said, Kate Blanchett is great.
Mm-hmm.
Oscar Isaac as Prince John, I think, is a really good villain.
Oh yeah.
Leia Sedo's in there. It's got Max von Sydow, like a lot of great actors in that. So yeah, I feel like again, it's one that went under the radar when it came out and
Yeah.
has not really gained a lot of popularity, but it's one that I've enjoyed a number of times. There's great themes in there about freedom and liberty and that whole thing too. So yeah, just a really great movie that I'm glad we're getting a chance to talk about it here. Alrighty, now moving on to my number 3 pick, released May 5th in the year 2000. It is Gladiator. Gladiator is a favorite movie of mine of all time. By the way, all 3 of these are 5-star movies. I think
Oh,
Ridley
okay.
Scott is one of the best directors of all time. So he's got a lot of movies I really like, and this is certainly one of them. This was easily in the top 3. This is another one with a great director's cut. I don't think the director's cut is like the must-see version necessarily, but I think it does add to the movie and does enhance it a
Mm.
bit. It's almost 3 hours, 2 hours, 51 minutes runtime on that one, but definitely worth checking out. $103 million budget. It looks like the budget was like 300 million. I mean, this movie looks incredible. It grossed 460 million, so a huge hit. As you mentioned, as it says here on the Blu-ray, winner of 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. As you mentioned, Best Actor for Russell Crowe. Stunning, stunning work here by everyone involved. Russell Crowe's great in this lead role. He's probably at his best here. I can't think of a better character that he's played. Just a very kind of honorable character who's on this quest for vengeance. It's kind of the only thing keeping him alive is this desire for revenge, and he just does a great job playing the role. Connie Nielsen is great here. Jaimon Hunsu, I think, is really wonderful. This is probably the first thing I ever remember seeing him in.
Yeah.
He does a great job. Mr. Richard Harris, I mean,
Mm.
he's
Yeah.
fantastic here as well. Of course, Joaquin Phoenix. This is kind of the movie that put him on the map, I feel like, too. And
Yeah.
just playing this great villainous role, very prideful, arrogant type of a character. He just does it so well. And I got to listen to the commentary here, which was both Russell Crowe and Ridley Scott on the commentary. A lot of great insight, specifically about the actors and what they all brought to the table. But stunning cinematography too. Just it looks great. Like I said, the sweeping shots of the landscapes and the coliseums and all these things. There's obviously some CGI involved here. It's pretty early CGI, but it looks really good. They're not using it too extensively. Editing is great. Production design, going all the way back to the Roman Empire is just totally puts you in that world completely. Sets look incredible. All the costumes are great. Great stunt work. The fight sequences and the fight choreography, they just feel very realistic and dangerous. It doesn't never feels like it's a dance. Some fight scenes can kind of feel like, oh, they're just kind of doing their routine,
Yeah. Yeah.
But this one doesn't feel like that
Rehearsed.
at all. It feels very much like
Mm.
they're hard hitting and quite violent, quite a violent film, but really really well done. Great themes, themes of eternity, themes of justice and honor. There's a great quote, one of my favorite movie quotes of all time. Maximus says, "What we do in life echoes in eternity," which I think is so true and just a great line of dialogue that's well delivered. So yeah, this is an all-time great movie. I've watched a number of times and can't wait to watch it again. So that's my number three, Gladiator.
Great. I'll withhold comments further.
Great, excellent. What do you got at number two, Bert?
I actually have The Martian at number two.
Oh, great. Yeah.
Um, Interestingly, I didn't know this until I think yesterday that it had 7 Oscar nominations. I probably knew
Wow.
a while back when it was on the Oscars, but and including Best Picture and Best Actor.
Huh.
Um, but yeah, I mean, and you touched on it, but it's just a thoroughly enjoyable drama about human survival. Obviously, you mentioned Castaway. There's a lot of comparison to that.
Sure.
Even the tone, but also the plot and how he's
Hmm.
by himself most of the film. I mean, they actually do cut over to down to the people on Earth quite a few
Yes.
times,
Yes.
but still, I mean, Damon carries. I would say in rating the performance, I think Hanks is slightly better at that. Just the actor by himself, but Damon is pretty much right there too. Just an engaging guy to watch, and he talks to the camera a lot more, gives a lot more verbal feedback. Whereas Hanks's performance, it's more nuanced and organic, I guess it
Yeah.
feels like a little bit.
Right.
But both are great, and the film's a little long, but not necessarily to its detriment. The pacing is pretty good, and it looks terrific. There's some really good editing here. But I mean, and this is one I've seen a few times. 4.5 stars.
Yeah. Great movie. I'm glad it's in your list because, like I said, it's one of my wife's favorites. So it was like, we're doing a Ridley Scott podcast. She's like, okay, we have to watch The Martian first. I was like, okay. I wasn't really looking forward to watching it because I liked this on the first watch. I wasn't crazy about it. Second
Oh
watch, I
yeah.
liked it a lot more. I
Mm-hmm.
think I was, more engaged in Damon's performance. It's so interesting because it's such a just devastating situation to find yourself in, but he
Mm-hmm.
uses humor, to
Yeah.
kind of get through it. He's kind of like
Yeah.
always cracking jokes. And, I think my favorite is, I don't want to brag, but I think I'm the greatest botanist on this planet, like little things like that that just make you laugh, that are really good. And then, like you said, there's essentially three storylines here because you have him on Mars, but then you have the team in the space station, and then you have the team at NASA on Earth. And
Mm-hmm.
just like you mentioned, the editing is so good
Yeah.
because I never feel like I'm away from Damon for too long. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a good balance of each one of those things. And yeah, all the act. I mean, this is all A-list actors: Jessica Chastain, I mean, Jeff Daniels, Chiwetel Ejiofor. I mean, so many great actors in this movie, and they
Yeah.
all just play their roles very believably. Spouting this, I mean, it's nonsense to me, all this mathematician dialogue and all this physics stuff. But it's just very, very well delivered, very believable, very fun movie to watch for
Yeah.
a kind of more intense subject. Yeah, I really enjoy this movie. So again, I'm glad it came up again, and we could talk about it.
Yeah, I want to mention one more thing.
Mm.
Some comparisons to draw. Apollo 13, kind of a
Oh
similar
yeah,
thing.
sure.
Stranded out and they have to bring them back.
Yep.
All is lost.
Oh
And,
yeah.
and also the negotiator. These films where someone has a particular specialty in
Mm.
something, and then because of something that happens, they're then forced to display their prowess in that area.
Right.
Right. So in All is
Yeah.
lost, I mean, Redford's this terrific boatsman, or what's the word?
Right. Yeah. Seaman. I don't
And
know. Yeah.
yeah, and so we get to see that in action because of the
Yeah.
situation he finds himself in.
Right. Right.
And Samuel Jackson, same thing. He's this
Mm.
expert hostage negotiator who then has to take a hostage at one point, and then he's always one step ahead. Like, I like those kind of things.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is cool. No, it's very well done. You can tell the book was written by a real NASA engineer. And he
Oh
knew all
wow.
the jargon and the technical stuff.
Uh,
I was watching some behind the scenes. I guess he was going through, he was one of these guys that has to go through all the scenarios. Like, okay, if this happens, what do we do? And
mm,
that's how he ended up coming up with this movie. He's like, okay, what's everything that could go wrong if you were going out into space, basically? And so that's how he wrote the
yeah.
book, and he
Huh.
was very involved with the film, from what I understand. So yeah, they just do a great job with the writing, and yeah, Ridley's direction is great. The whole look of the movie and the editing, like we were mentioning, is just really really fantastic. All right, on to my number two. Now this one and two, they're neck and neck for me. They're really close because number two is one of my favorite movies ever made. It is Blade Runner. Blade Runner, I ended up putting it two because I rewatched another movie that ended up going up to number one, just barely edging it out. But this movie is still one of my favorite sci-fi movies. You know, it's got that kind of noir feel. We've talked about it before on the podcast, so I won't go too much into detail. But Harrison Ford, I just think, is so unique in this movie. His performance is very different than your typical kind of heroic Harrison Ford role. He's kind of a guy who's lost his humanity. He's kind of disillusioned with his life where he's at. Very cold kind of character. And through the interactions with these replicants who are basically artificial humans, he kind of rediscovers his humanity. And so that's what I like about it. I like the themes in it. I like the look of this movie. I think it's probably still one of the most unique looking sci-fi worlds. You know, 2019 LA, it's all raining and you know, a lot of neon. It's very inspired by kind of Japanese culture, and it's kind of a melding of East meets West, and kind of the design of it, the aesthetic. Vangelis, his score is in this, I think, is just so, again, ethereal, dreamlike quality to it. Very synth heavy, but just very unique. And then, you know, supporting roles, I really like Sean Young here. Daryl Hannah, I think, is, you know, very striking character. Edward James Olmos has a unique role, and of course Rutger Hauer, who's really the standout. It's kind of his movie in many ways as well. The kind of the parallel paths he and Harrison Ford's character go on are very unique and interesting. So yeah, it's all in all just a movie I've gotten a lot of enjoyment out of. The more I watch it, the more I like it. There's kind of layers to it, you know. It's one of those movies with, this is the 5 disc collector's edition, because it's got, I think, at least 5 cuts of the movie. Theatrical version, international version, director's cut, final cut, the original work print version, which is the one they showed to test audiences. So has like unfinished effects and stuff in it. It's kind of interesting. It just has a really interesting history, this movie, in the history of cinema. It's just a very unique movie. $30 million budget, only grossed 41 million, was not a big hit at all. Big bomb, actually, and has gained a cult following, so much so that it got a sequel, Blade Runner 2049, which was made just a few years ago. So yeah, it's one that, of course, was going to make the list. I just had to figure out where I was going to put it. So for reasons we'll get into in just a moment, ended up at number 2.
Yeah, and I won't bash it. The thing is, I really wanted to like the movie,
Sure.
but I just don't really get it. It's
Yeah.
I will say what I do like is the visuals. I think a lot of films have copied that, especially the futuristic city with the you know, the flying cars or whatever
Flying
going
cars,
through
sure.
it, and
Yeah.
so many films have done that now, and
Right.
that might be the first. I mean, at least
Yeah.
to use special effects. I mean, there might be really old films that
Right.
tried more rudimentary ways of doing it, but
Sure.
so you know, he was a pioneer in a lot of ways for that film.
Yeah, that's the thing about it, is it was definitely a movie that he was pioneering new kinds of effects, and just a unique look. Again, that whole look of the city in the future, just crowded streets, and like you're saying, all the flying cars and the lighting, and just all of it is just so different. Of course, like you're saying, it's been copied now many times. A very influential movie on many filmmakers, but yeah, at the time it was certainly one of a kind. Okay, on to your number one. What do you got at number one? Ridley Scott.
Gladiator, number
Gladiator,
one.
of course. Yes.
Yeah, so a couple of things I'll touch on, you've talked about, but I'm just enthralled with the visual style here. The entire film looks great. You know, part of it is how the special effects and the editing is used during some of the battle scenes, and also the chariot scene, which obviously probably borrowed quite a bit from Ben-Hur, right?
Sure.
So some of the edits during that battle in chariot, it looks a bit off and kind of surreal. And a while back, I don't know if this comes up on the commentary, but my understanding is that for certain scenes like that, to sort of depict this sort of surreal characteristic, Ridley Scott, during that scene, I think every other frame he doubled the frame,
Oh,
and so that's
interesting.
why it's almost a bit herky jerky, but
Yeah.
that's not a good word to describe it, because it's very
Right.
interesting visually.
Yeah.
So those scenes in particular, that's why they look so interesting and different and
Mm.
violent. And
Right.
anyway, I
Right.
just like when a director tries that kind of thing, and I think it
Yeah.
works. I think it
Oh,
works
yeah.
great.
Yeah, I agree.
And that might have helped with some of the special effects, like they have a lot
Mm.
like or a tiger. Is it a tiger? I think it's a
Tiger.
tiger,
Yeah.
right?
Tiger. Yeah.
I haven't seen it in a couple years, but And so, but anyway, yeah, I love those kinds of things. The locations in here, the sets, the costumes, and then again back to the visuals for a minute. The face replacement.
Mm,
The character Proximo, played by Oliver Reed, he died during filming, and so
mm,
they had to replace his face, and then had different actor finish. Well, they do that a lot nowadays with
mhm.
face replacement, but this is back in 2000,
Yeah.
and I can tell you that I can't see any seams or anything that looks out of place. I mean, that's really incredible. And then another thing that's incredible is that apparently Ridley Scott has his own effects company that did
Mm.
most of the effects for
Oh,
this
wow.
film.
Hmm.
Yeah, which is very enterprising of him. I can't
Yeah,
think of
for
too many
sure.
directors that have their own. I mean,
Yeah,
that's not true. I think
him and George Lucas.
ILM. Yeah, right. I mean, didn't yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so that's pretty interesting. And on top of that, I mean, on top of the technical stuff, it's a just a very compelling plot.
Mm.
The cast and the acting, the script, so many quotable lines. I mean, you mentioned maybe the best one, but I mean, are you not entertained? Is I mean,
Yes.
been it's invaded our pop culture,
Right.
so much, and that's just one of them. You know what I mean? There's so
Right.
many great lines in this film.
Sure.
Uh, which usually you're talking about a comedy when you talk about great lines, or sometimes you are,
Right.
but this
Yeah.
one, yeah, just some great. It's just a great script.
Yeah, it is.
And then the score, one of the best pieces of music that I've ever heard, even outside of the film. So many hours of listening to that score
Right.
by Hans Zimmer, and more. I mean, dozens of more hours than what I've invested into the movie by far. I mean,
Right.
it's maybe
Yeah,
100 or 200 more hours than
sure.
in the movie. It's just so amazing. It's my number 12 film of all time. Gladiator is, and so I had to include it.
Absolutely. Yeah. What's her name? The singer? Is it
Lisa
Lisa
Gerard. Lisa
Gerard? Yeah.
Gerard. Yeah,
Incredible.
yeah.
Incredible voice. Just
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so unique and
Mm-hmm.
just powerful. I mean, really, just moving. Moving
Yeah.
film on every level. The music just enhances everything about it. And yeah, one of the all-time best.
Yeah.
Okay, coming up on my number one, it is Kingdom of Heaven. Kingdom of Heaven is a movie I remember watching. It came out in 2005. It had to have been years after it came out that I saw it for the first time, but really enjoyed it. It was a theatrical cut that I watched, 2 hours, 24 minutes. Then I found out, oh no, there's a much better version, director's cut. Of course, Ridley has again on Blu-ray, and it's 3 hours and 10 minutes. So they're adding about 46 minutes of footage here
Wow.
to the film. There's even a version on this Blu-ray. They call it the Roadshow version because it has an intermission. They stop the
Oh,
movie and has an intermission and plays music, just like they did in the old days. But yeah, this director's cut is, I think, the best director's cut ever, probably. Definitely
wow.
one of my top five director's cuts. It just really does so much to enhance the movie. I mean, you're getting
Hmm.
so much more with the characters, more of the action, just everything. Everything is leveled up kind of in this director's cut. Budget of 130 million, only grossed 218, so it wasn't a big hit again. I think these kind of movies were falling out of style, probably is what was going on. Gladiator was kind of a big hit. Then they tried to make a bunch of movies like Gladiator, and then
Yeah.
they kind of by 2005 it was starting to fall off. So it didn't get a lot of attention. It's one of the few films I wrote down here. It's rated R for strong violence and epic warfare. So it's the only film that gets an R rating for how epic it is. It's just too epic. It is a huge movie, though. I mean, it really, honestly, I think it puts all of his other movies to shame when it comes to its
Really?
just scale. It's incredible. I mean, it's Lord of the Rings level type battle sequences. I mean, huge armies
Wow.
fighting out in the desert. It's all about the Crusades, so it's all set in Jerusalem. The Holy Wars, if there is such a thing. And it's just so well done, though. Like I said again, just like we were saying with Gladiator, just the authenticity with when it comes to the sets, the
Mhm.
costumes, the locations,
Yeah.
all of it. It just feels so real. Really puts you back in that time. Orlando Bloom stars as a blacksmith. Even just the opening scenes with him as his blacksmith shop, it's just very authentic. You can tell they have the way they have it all set up and what he's doing is feels very real.
Wait, two
Um,
seconds.
yeah,
Isn't he
go
a
ahead.
blacksmith in Pirates of the Caribbean?
He is. He's been typecast as a
Okay.
blacksmith for some reason. I don't know why. But yes, he's a
So
blacksmith here
specific.
again. But this is probably his best role. I think it's a nuanced performance. You know, he's the lead role, a character you can very much see yourself in, very much kind of an everyman. But he learns stuff about his true heritage that sends him on this quest to Jerusalem. Liam Neeson plays a great role here. It's one of my favorite Liam Neeson roles. It's a smaller role, but it's very significant in the film. We also have just a bevy of incredible actors. Jeremy Irons is in this. Brendan Gleeson, David
Hmm.
Thewlis, Eva
Yeah.
Green, and then Edward Norton also plays a role
Really?
in the film. Yeah, it's a great cast, one of the best casts probably ever assembled. All of them just doing great work. It's just a wonderful looking movie. Again, the battle sequences, the action sequences are great, really well shot. But you know, at the heart of the movie, at the heart of any movie, it's about the themes and the story for me. And this one is all about the kingdom of heaven, and people are constantly talking about this throughout the movie and what it means to them. And you know, kind of the conclusion the main character comes to is the kingdom of heaven is in the heart. It's not in a place. It's a spiritual place, right? And so that's what I really get out of the movie is those great themes of spirituality. We're dealing with knighthood and with honor a lot in this movie. It's another film that talks a lot about redemption and forgiveness. When to fight and when not to fight is another big theme throughout the film. So just a lot of great ideas here that are presented very well. Great emotional moments with the characters and their dynamics are really interesting. So yeah, it's a film that I was just blown away by on rewatch. This director's cut, again, one of the best I've ever seen. It gets a full 5 stars again from me, just like these other two movies. And yeah, so it's a long movie, so it's not one I watch very often, but it's on this rewatch, it just really shot up in my rankings because it was just really impactful. So yeah, Kingdom of Heaven ended up at number one.
This is one of the best things about the podcast is that I didn't even check that one out. I mean, it looked like there were a lot of actors in it,
Yeah,
but you're right. I mean, there were a lot of gladiator, like the people that want to be the next gladiator,
right.
and like Exodus, and I mean, there's been a bunch of them.
Yeah, sure.
But I for some reason kind of thought, yeah, this is they're probably trying to knock off Gladiator, but I'm definitely gonna seek this one out.
Yeah, yeah, it almost feels like I feel like it's almost a sequel to Gladiator in many ways. Like
Mm,
you know, it's obviously hundreds of years later in the timeline, but it's another, you know, kind of real historical event and that kind of thing. So yeah, I highly recommend it. Actually, I think Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, and Robin Hood would make a great trilogy because Robin Hood, he's coming back from the Crusades, which we see in this movie. So you
yeah.
could kind of do a triple feature there, and it would work out pretty well, I think.
Is there a director that, other than Ridley Scott, that has done historical drama and battle like that? Not fiction like Lord of the Rings, but
Yeah,
in this manner, better than Ridley Scott.
I can't think of anyone. No,
The
nothing comes to
staging of
mind.
it and the
Yeah,
sets, and it's just all on point. Yeah.
yeah, it is. Yeah, the visuals in Kingdom of Heaven too, just the way it's shot and certain ways he sets up shots, like again, just the scale of it, it's just huge. It's like nothing I've ever seen before, you know, outside of like something like Lord of the Rings. But like I said,
Yeah.
this is grounded in history, so it makes it even more kind of
Yeah.
impactful when you see it. Like this really
Wow.
happened. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah, great film. Highly recommend it.
Excellent.
All right, folks. Well, that is it for our Scott Brothers podcast. Ridley and Tony Scott. We went through their filmographies, gave you our top 3 films from each of those directors. Had a great time doing it. Bert, it was a pleasure as always.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Cam.
All right, everybody, make sure you hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified of all our videos, and we will see you next time right here on The Real World.